for example, I no longer got to teach.
Yeah.
Right? Some people do teach as an administrator, but when you're first in that role, it can be a 24/7 type of position where you really have to focus on it. So you lose some touch points with students. You don't have that. What I loved about teaching was the mentoring with students, and when they graduated and coming back and telling me about their successes. And I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have that at all anymore.
You just heard Beth Schwartz from the American Psychological Association in Washington, D.C. Garth interviewed Beth for episode 246 of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff.
APA Publishing wants to give you 15% off your order. If you teach classes like counseling, clinical psychopathology, or multicultural psychology, then this is for you. APA Publishing has books that are written by experts that are grounded in evidence and really help teachers. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a book they have right now called Helping Skills. It's in its 6th edition, and it gives students clear, practical frameworks for understanding and learning counseling techniques. It's perfect for hands-on practice and skill development. Here's another one. Cultural Humility helps students build self-awareness and engage meaningfully across diverse identities and experiences. So head to apa.org because they want to give you 15% off your order today using code PS15. That's capital P, capital S, 15. Go check out APA Publishing.
Hi, Psych Sessions listeners. This is Stephen Chu, one of the authors of Psychology in Your Life. For the new edition, I've created a series of brief videos that target common student problems in learning. They give practical, research-based strategies to help students learn more effectively. This new resource is called Improving Student Learning, a Video Guide. If you'd like to learn more about these videos or see a sample, feel free to reach out to me at stephen.chu, C-H-E-W, at www.norton.com.
Hi, my name is Drew Christopher. I joined SDP back in 1996 because I just wanted to be a better teacher, and I figured something called the Society for the Teaching of Psychology would help me in that regard, and it did. I became involved in a variety of task force, a variety of working groups, and so forth early on in my career. And looking back on it now, I think one of the biggest benefits wasn't just becoming a better teacher, but all the colleagues that I met along the way, and I'm still friends with today, who are also helping me still be a good teacher, if not a great teacher. Those professional connections have lasted a lifetime, and both personally and professionally, they're probably one of the most rewarding things that I can look back on the over 30 years I've been teaching and say it's probably the best thing I've ever done.
To join the Society for the Teaching of Psychology for only $35 a year, please visit teachpsych.org. Hi, folks. This is Garth. Another interview from NITOP 2026. I am here today with Dr. Beth Schwartz from the American Psychological Association, which is not where I first met her. She is the Senior Director of Pre-College and Undergraduate Psychology Education. And there's more than that? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
That's my title.
In LinkedIn, there's a little more in the title. So, but that's where we'll leave it for today. Okay.
I'll check that out and see what I wrote.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it all makes sense. But thanks for sitting down with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how's your NITOP going today?
Always great. So glad to be back at NITOP.
Yeah, have you been here before a few times?
I was here long ago when I was teaching psychology, when I was a faculty member. But when I headed into administration as a chief academic officer, my focus had to be on conferences for chief academic officers.
How are those different?
Well, they focus more on all of the priorities and strategic initiatives and the different practices we have to take into account when we're leading the academic program. So they're very different. They're very different. different community, a wonderful group of people, but very different community.
Yeah.
So what was great when I saw you obviously at ACT this past October, and I was able to go to that as well for the first time in more than a decade. And I just felt like this was back to the community where I always loved to be a part of.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. Really, really interesting. Well, I hope that we'll, cover that whole story. But yeah. And NITOP is it's really special just for people who have never been, or people who are wondering how is the new location? You were at the Trade Winds a long time ago.
I was. And that was a lovely place to have it.
Yeah.
And this seems similar to it, to that location.
Yeah.
Similar.
I like it. I think I like it better.
I've been so inside and at all the different conference sessions, I haven't been outside. So this afternoon where they give you that break.
Yeah. They do give you a half day off here, which is so fantastic, especially because you and I were just out in the sun, soaking it in because it's so beautiful out right now. So we'll get to this interview and then we'll go, we can go have a spa day,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You need a little bit of time off because it's a longer conference.
So you are working with the American Psychological Association now, and maybe we can just start there. What are your duties in this position? What do you spend your days doing?
Sure.
And when you are at a session like you are today, what kinds of things are you thinking about? We're thinking about students in the classroom. What are you thinking about?
Right. I think probably thinking about many of the same things. My role is about trying to support teaching of psychology, and both from the faculty perspective, what can we do to make sure that faculty have the resources that they need to be best in their classroom? What are the policies that we can help to develop with those who are APA members on some of our governance committees to ensure that the curriculum is as strong as it should be? And of course, about student success. We want to make sure that there's great accessibility to psychological science. Though my role is about pre-college, so the high school experience and the undergraduate experience, there are members of the psychology team at APA that work at the K through 12 focus area. So I can collaborate with them to think about the application of psychological science in teaching preschool all the way through to 12, and also teaching of psychology at the graduate level. So it's just an exciting role because, as opposed to the role that I had as an administrator, where it was academic affairs as a whole, I get to go back and focus on psychology, which was the discipline that brought me to higher education in the first place and where my passion was. So, I'm part of a psychology team, as we're called right now, which is the members from applied education, practice, public interest, and science. And we're all working together, with, rowing the boat in the same direction and improving lives, improving society through the application of psychological science.
How long did it take you to figure out all those systems at APA and how
that took a while. Yeah, that's a great question. I've been a member of APA, and I tell people this. I've been a member of APA since I was an undergraduate, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was very involved in Division II when I became a faculty member. And with some years as a VP for awards and recognition, always tried to attend the STP conference. So I was aware of the organization of Division II of APA. I did not know the organization. I didn't even know there was a CEO. I mean, I knew there was a president. We elect, as members of APA, we elect a president each year, and we have our votes that give, members of council, and I knew that existed. I did not know how APA itself was organized with a CEO and a deputy CEO and different heads of different areas, and that there's I knew about publishing, having written a book published by APA, but there's marketing, and there's human resources like there is in any other organization. It's a very There's a large staff. And in fact, when I started, the person who I reported to, Dennis Stolley, gave me great advice. He said, I want you to just meet people across the organization, because that helped me understand what people's roles were, what the organization was like, and where the collaboration can happen across APA.
Yeah. I haven't checked in on APA personnel recently, but is Arthur Evans Jr. still our CEO?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Jim Diaz-Granados still there?
Deputy CEO.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's interesting. I interviewed both of them years ago, and then I think Jim was in the education directorate before that.
He was the chief of education.
Okay.
Of that when we had directorates a couple years back.
Oh, we don't have directorates anymore.
No, about a year and a half ago, we no longer call them directorates. We have that larger psychology team, which kind of takes away the silos of people working in education, practice, applied, and science. And instead, we're part of a larger group, a larger team that allows us to really work collaboratively on many issues that span practice, applied, science, education, and also now public interest has just joined in with us as well.
Wow. Okay. Faculty colleagues, I am sounding the alarm. Psych content is great, but it's not enough. And so we need textbook publishers to come in and help us deliver the skills of psychology to our students, which is where Macmillan is stepping in with its course platform, Achieve. Now more than ever, we need students who can think critically and who can be data literate. We need them to be able to manage things like responsible use of AI ethically. The new Achieve from Macmillan Learning is addressing each of these skills one by one in their course platform. So if you haven't checked out Achieve in a while, you can go and check out their psychology titles at achieve.macmillanlearning.com. Save yourself some time, give your students some skills, check out Achieve. So I'm going to try to track, but it's still, as you know, hard to, that organization is hard to track sometimes. So you are pre-college and undergraduate education. And so there is an education section in that group, there's an ed section, but does that include also the graduate education? And then I didn't know K-12 was a part of APA. How long has that been happening for?
I've worked for APA just a little over 3 years, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how long it's been there.
That's fun, though.
I'm pretty sure for a while, though, because there's some resources available at apa.org that's been there for quite some time that speaks to teaching in K through 12 and some ways that psychological science can help.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. All right. What areas are under you? So CABE still exists under your position, right?
Right. Well, there's two governance groups. There's CABE, the Committee on Associate and Baccalaureate Education, and the TOPSS group, which is the Teachers of Psychology in Secondary School. So both of those are the teacher-focused, curriculum-focused, classroom-focused, student-focused governance groups of APA.
So where does Emily Chesney's fit in? She's in the TOPSS side.
She's on the TOPSS side.
And is she your counterpart for?
She reports. So I'd have.
You have two people.
Right.
Okay.
I've had Emily and Martha.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Who've reported to me.
Okay.
And Martha, who we all know well, has just retired from 40 years of APA.
Oh, man.
40-year career, yeah.
Martha, I know you're going to be listening to this. And so we really appreciate you and congratulations on your retirement.
Absolutely.
You deserve it. And you've left a mark, even though you won't talk to me about it on the Psych Sessions podcast.
Oh, she will.
No, she won't. I've tried to bug her for years. In fact, most recently, like 2 weeks ago, and I said,
so funny.
No pressure, but a little bit of pressure. Do you want to do it? And she said, no.
She's so humble, all the work that she's done. And I'm excited that she was willing to do some consulting for us for 10 hours a week starting later in January. Just as we transition and really think about the office. And I try to define that position.
Yeah. What has changed in your position since you've been there, or like what changes do you see coming?
The one thing, I will say the one thing that I noticed is that, particularly with CABE, is that we've had great engagement of faculty from smaller colleges, smaller institutions, and yet most of our students in Intro to Psychology are at those larger R1 institutions. So I just put together an advisory group of large university psych leaders. There's about 12. We're going to meet for the first time in February. So I can really understand what the needs and challenges are at the larger school where more of our majors are being taught, particularly in the intro to course, but for psych majors overall. So I want to expand our engagement to make sure that that voice is heard. We're going to talk a lot more about AI just because of the world that we live in, and we're in the midst of developing some AI workshops. One that I had mentioned at our lunch yesterday, where we know that there's lots of questions being asked about AI in the classroom, but there's not a lot of research that's out there yet. And part of it is that people might not know how to conduct that SOTL research, particularly outside of psychology. So I'm talking with some colleagues at some other organizations about how can we start to reach out to get faculty to understand how do you conduct scholarship on teaching and learning to really see what AI does to the learning process. So that's going to be a series of workshops. And then we want to do that basic AI and education. How can you really think about using AI and how does it impact cognitive load, both for the faculty and for students? How does it impact just workload for faculty and students? So that's just some directions that I'm thinking about, just to have greater impact to really address what's going on in the classroom these days.
Yeah, like as long as I have been around APA, we did the assessment project that was, well,
Yeah.
I'll go back.
Yes.
It was SNAP first, the Summit for the National now I'm going to forget the names of them. Anyway, there were like all these projects that came out and recommendations that came out. And so a lot of times these are multi-year kind of things that faculty are working with APA on. Right. The most recent one being the introductory psychology push and the book that came out probably 5-6 years ago, I think now.
Right. Or there's assessment, project assessment.
Project assessment is
That's
there.
Of course, the 3.0, the guidelines that APA works with folks on, and then the Skillful Psychology Student. Yeah. One thing that we've been talking about is looking at that Skillful Psychology Student and considering some AI issues that are not included because it's just come up in the recent years, and that last version, I think, is at least 3 years old.
Yeah. So I heard about a version 2.0. Is that underway? We
are just putting together a task force to have to see what that can look like.
It's an incredible document, folks. Mm-hmm. If you go to apa.org/
if you just put Skillful Psychology Student APA in a Google search, it'll bring you right to that PDF.
Yeah, so it's this lovely PDF, and it shows. Let's count them. Somewhere around 17 different skills that a student coming out of a psychology program should have to enter the workforce. And I don't want to step on Karen, who would tell this story better, but I think that Karen Knopfel and team, who else? Was Stacy Spencer on the part of this group? I don't quite remember.
I know that I've been talking. Karen's the one we've been talking to about the next version. But I found this really helpful because it gives students the ability to look at the skills when they're on the job market and they're having conversations with potential employers to tell them what they've learned, because those employers might not understand what a psychology major looks like, and they jump to the misinformation of
Absolutely.
You're all been trained as a therapist, even as an undergraduate. So it's a really great document, both for faculty and for students.
Yeah.
And that's what I found when I as you know, I taught in the classroom for 24 years before my administrative roles, and was a member and have been a member of APA, but I didn't know all the resources that APA offers from the Skillful Psychology Student. I knew about the guidelines because I was a department chair, and we used those to help create our evaluation. Or the Speaking of Psych podcasts, which I had not been familiar with. Part of it is that inbox, and APA does email us with this information, but we sometimes have to pick and choose what we open and what we read, because they do a good job of sending information out. There's the science spotlights now. There's lots of different newsletters that go out. There's PTN, Psychology Teachers newsletter, and PSNs, but there's so much out there that it wasn't until I was on the staff of APA that I discovered all those things I could have been using while I was in the classroom.
There are so many resources out there from APA and then also from STP Division 2 of APA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to Drew Christopher, as you know, as the new president for 2026, about making sure that we collaborate more so with Division 2, because we both have the same mission, the pre-college and undergraduate.
That's right.
And STP, and making sure we're not doing redundant work, and we're just doing work that both supports one another in ways that can help faculty in the classroom.
Yeah, how does that? Like, how do you imagine that relationship works? Because it's so interesting, right? Like, STP is one of the divisions of APA. They work for teachers of psychology, but your office works also for teachers of psychology.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. The relationship's interesting.
Right. Well, for our work, we will look for what the CEO's strategic plan is all about, and we will develop our initiatives that fit with the overall APA's strategic plan. Yeah. Whereas STP can really be more specific and choose the direction that they want to choose for the year, especially the presidential initiatives that are chosen. So sometimes they overlap, sometimes they won't. I think, we're all in touch with the faculty who are out there. So it's likely, though, that there's a lot of overlap. For instance, I know Drew is very interested in AI, and that's what I was saying I was working on with these workshops. So we're going to talk some more about that.
Yeah, that's great. I've really appreciated the mission shift in APA as an organization. I feel like sometimes missions are really poorly done in that they're like, you read them and you're like, okay, so what does that mean? The current one, which I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot off the top of your head, but you kind of alluded to it earlier, but it's very much applied. It's very much psychology can benefit people's lives.
Right.
In the gist of it. Yeah.
Right.
And I love that. It's something you can just like sink your teeth into, right? You know what that means.
When I first got hired at APA, or when I was first looking at the position itself, and saw that initially the position was part of the science directorate, I was very pleased with the fact that APA is focused on the science of psychology, because I think the perception from psychology faculty in general is that APA has been very focused primarily on practice, which is certainly a very important part of APA. But there's many who are outside of practice and want to have APA there for them as well. And with the science directorate, the education directorate in the past, now the psychology team, it does a very good job of broadly representing people who are in psychological science as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of history in there you could dip into, but we don't need to go there.
Let's not.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been in the job for
a little over 3 years.
A little over 3 years. And I imagine the first year was just kind of figuring it out, right?
Well, the applied office, which is what I initially joined, was relatively new and just had a senior director. And then I was brought on as an associate director. And then we brought on a program manager. So it was a whole new role for me because, going from faculty member to provost to this role was a very big career shift, one that I was very excited about. But certainly the first year was what is the organization of APA? What is my role? How can I have impact? Who can I be working with? And what was really exciting was with Apply. Now, when I used to teach Intro to Psych, my focus was that, as many of us focus on, is that psychological science applies to every aspect of your life. There's that application. So the fact that I was in the office of Applied and we could talk about the many different ways that we see psychological science applied to everyone's lives, it was a great fit for me.
Yeah. Hey folks, I want to talk about autism spectrum disorder. Specifically, I want to talk about how good testing can help adults get the help that they need. But first, a few statistics. Did you know that almost 62 million people worldwide would qualify for the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis? That's 1 in 127. And when we think about teenagers in the US, that's more than 50,000 youth a year who are going to be making that transition from childhood to adulthood with this diagnosis. And many of them are actually going to lose critical services at this time. So enter ASRS. That is the Autism Spectrum Rating Scale for adults. It's scientifically valid. It's a multi-informant rating scale from leading experts Sam Goldstein and Jack Naglieri, tailored specifically to adults in their unique presentation. And it identifies late emerging symptoms and the masking behaviors that often go unnoticed. It's perfect for classroom demonstrations or projects and for training. This test goes for real-world relevance to help people. If you want to learn more, head to mhs.com and check out the Education and Training Partnership Program, or simply click Contact Us to get more information. That is mhs.com.
And worked on a lot, like the Work in America survey, which is what the Applied group has worked on the last couple of years, especially post-pandemic, when we were trying to figure out all aspects of work and how does it impact or influence mental health, mental well-being, and so on. And so that survey has been very interesting to do, or psychological safety in the workplace. So some of it was my background as my PhD is in experimental psych and cognitive psych. And my research as a graduate student and into my faculty years was psych and law and children's eyewitness testimony, suggestibility, and how do we improve children's reports as an eyewitness. And it led then into, because of my teaching focus, teaching and learning and scholarship of teaching and learning and academic integrity and honor systems, and not where I was headed when I started at APA. So it was like this new, interesting new challenge of an area of psychology that I had to do a lot of research on, about like what is psychological safety? How does it relate to the workplace? People in the area, though, were very willing to have conversations with me. Amy Edmondson was more than happy to sit and talk about psychological safety. And really, I wanted to make sure I understood what it was all about when I was asked to come and give talks on psychological safety, when people were wondering, how can we improve the workplace retention, satisfaction, on all aspects of well-being of our employees through psychological safety. So that was a really interesting transition for me. And then when this position came up in education, and I was approached to consider it, like that's a perfect fit. I have the background as a faculty member. I have the background as a leader of academic affairs. So I was excited to then transition into the pre-college and undergraduate education.
Yeah. Great. That has been now for how long?
Just a year.
Almost
a year.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Well, I ran into you at Endicott.
Yes.
Years
I brought
ago.
you on as an evaluator. You and Chris Hackler.
And Hackler, who's here as well. And
right.
So that was our introduction to working together. So that was a really special moment for a lot of reasons. Meeting you, meeting Chris, getting the experience to do that. But let's go back and we'll get to Endicott. And then I'm really interested in all your transitions because you've done everything. at this point?
It's been such an interesting career. My connection to psychology started as an undergraduate myself, as a first generation student at a small college, and I went to Colby College up in Waterville, Maine, and I sat. This is part of the story because my focus on student success and my focus on faculty development kind of harkens back to my own experience when I sat there at convocation on day one at Colby. I remember we were in the chapel, and the president of the college, remember this is back in the mid-'80s, or the early 80s, and the president of the college stood up there and he's talking to all the first-year students, and he said one of those, look to your left, look to your right, and only 2 of you out of the 3 are going to graduate from this college. And I had the unfortunate instance of having a column to my left. And I thought, okay, I was calculating the percentage. First, I had a 66% chance of graduating. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, that just dropped to 50%. And I bring that up because I went in when my parents attended college, didn't graduate. My brother was in college, but I was going in without that knowledge base as a first generation student, as it's defined, without the confidence that people go in. I was going in as a music major. I took, AP music theory, but wasn't sure about my ability to do well in college at all. And I think what's very important is that what's happened over these decades is that at that point in time, colleges did not have centers for academic success. They didn't have centers for teaching excellence. They didn't have writing centers. All of that academic support that we really rely on for student success on campuses across this country were never there. So when I got there, I was not prepared for college. And my first semester really demonstrated that. I remember getting a paper back from my English professor just telling me I didn't know how to write without showing me how to write, right? So I was kind of, floundering, figured it out, took my first psych class, my second semester there, really enjoyed that, the discipline.
Just as an elective, you were interested? Okay.
I thought, changed my major. I was no longer a music major, loved music. But I decided I'll use it as a love and a passion, but not my.
Did you play an instrument?
I'm a clarinetist. Yes.
I love the clarinet.
Yeah,
I don't play it, but I love. I especially love it in jazz. But
yeah, I still have it. I still play it. Not as often, but it's set up in my guest room with a stand and music so that I can go back to it. But psychology just spoke to me, and that's where I kind of turned around, and that's when I went up to graduate school, and that's where I learned the difference between an R1 institution and a small liberal arts college, and the differences in faculty's focus on research versus students in their classroom and teaching, just because of and not that there's anything wrong. They're just very different approaches of why faculty would choose an R1 institution versus a SLAC. And I knew when I was there, if I was going to go into academics, that it would be a small liberal arts college. Though I will say I taught 2 classes as a graduate student. And I taught my first class, it was Sensation and Perception. I think it was my 2nd or 3rd year. It was an evening class. So the students, my memory is that they were all older than me. I went into that first class, I taught it, and I left thinking, oh, no. I went back to my office, and my memory is, and I think this is a true memory, I don't think it's a false memory, I went under my desk, where the chair goes under your desk, and just to sit and think, and I remember sitting there thinking, who can I get to teach this class? Because I don't want to do this. I can't do this. That was my first teaching experience. And obviously I overcame that, and I went back and I taught another class. But when it was time to figure out the direction of my career, I really valued that experience at Colby, at a small liberal arts college. It was those faculty who taught me how to think, who taught me how to write, and who taught me about the passion of psychology and supported me as a human being. And I wanted to provide that for students myself.
All right. I need to backfill a couple things for myself. So
where did you grow up, and were you in the Colby area?
I went to high school west of Boston. I was in Massachusetts.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so how did you find Colby as? My parents had me meet with a private guidance counselor because my high school I don't think they had much confidence in the guidance counselors. I'm not sure. And I just started looking. I thought I wanted to stay relatively close. I remember I wanted to be a music major. So I auditioned at UNH and UMass, and I went pretty kind of close by to me. I applied to Ithaca College, Bates, Colby. And then I just visited them. I went up with my friend Linda. I remember she and I took a road trip. Hobart William Smith was one of them. And I got to Colby's campus, and it was one of those feelings like when students visit campuses and you're like, this is where I want to go. Mm. It was just a small community, and it's a beautiful campus. And that's where I decided, okay, this is where I want to go. And ironically, the guidance counselor said to my parents in that meeting, well, she can apply, but she's not going to get in. Wow.
And so and the other kind of funny story is then they had, when you're in the 80s, they had, and I think they still have college fairs at high schools. With tables. Yeah. We had that, and Colby was there. And I remember saying to my mom, that's where I want to go. And we were having this conversation because she remembered the college counselor saying, not worth applying to. And my high school friend David, who I'm still in touch with, said, just let her apply.
Wow.
I started talking to him about that. And so I applied. And when the day the envelope arrived, opened it up, and I got in. I don't think that my parents thought that was going to happen. That's where I went.
Did you get in as direct to the music major?
No, as is true of most liberal arts colleges, you don't get in, particularly then when it was not a career focus at all. Yeah. You just got into the college itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then there was at least one English faculty member who was not helpful to your writing process, but it sounded like then you ran into some good teachers.
The faculty there it's a great group of, it was, and it still is a great group of faculty. But I think it was just a different time frame where that kind of support, academic support and guidance, they didn't talk about first-generation students then. No. They didn't talk. Like I said, there was no writing tutors, writing centers. None of that existed. It had to take place through the faculty.
Yeah. Yeah. At our institution, we have this in all social science classes. We have this this group and this work existed before I got there. So it's on all of my syllabi. It has to be included on there, but it's like an information, it's an information literacy kind of statement. And I don't know why we put it in the syllabus. It's like it's directed to students to tell them about the class, and it's talking about standards and whatever, but it's really I got to the bottom of it. It's really for faculty who were coming in and teaching community college classes to first and second year students who were expecting them to do incredibly skillful work without giving them the proper kind of structure and building that in. Mm-hmm. And so that's still, even today, it still exists, and it's because teachers aren't trained.
Right. So what a big part of my career after I finished graduate school and found this job at a small liberal arts college in Virginia. I started at Randolph-Macon Women's College. There still was no teacher training at most graduate schools, or even when you got to that place, you had to rely on your own experiences in the classroom. Yeah. And then after I got there, and I was, loved that institution, taught intro and cognitive and research methods and senior seminar, and I had a 3-3 teaching load. It was a perfect balance of being able to teach and do research with students. My classes were relatively small, and it was an institution at that time of about 800 students. And then after being promoted and tenured, the dean at the time came up to me and asked me about helping with faculty development. Would you be interested in this? So it was about new faculty orientation. It was about mentoring. It was about getting people to understand the culture of the institution, particularly at a school with an honor system, which was very different. And it was about making sure faculty were aware of the academic center and the career development center, and giving them a great knowledge of the college as a whole outside of their smaller department. Mm-hmm. And that's really what got me interested in having impact beyond psychology and beyond being part of that department or the chair of the department, because I got great satisfaction in having that kind of impact and thinking that both faculty will have greater satisfaction with their jobs if they have greater awareness of the institution as a whole, and then students will benefit because it will impact their success as a student.
Yeah, it's an interesting calling for those people who make that transition from just psychology to whether it's a teaching and learning center or whether it's into administration. I'm sure people do it for a lot of different reasons, but I have heard this story over and over again in talking with people that they're like, I think I can have impact because I really care. And I think I can have the greatest impact at a higher level.
Right. And then you also sometimes get to a point of your career, like I feel like when you teach, you're constantly learning, you're constantly reflecting and evolving your classrooms. There's sometimes a point where you think, what other challenges do I want to take on in my career? So the faculty, it was a part-time role. I still taught, which was important. And then a new administration came in, and then there were these division heads or an assistant dean role that came up that I was approached to consider. And so I then became, for a couple of years, a division head and then an assistant dean at the college. And then it was like having insight into parts of that college that I didn't know about. I think it wasn't until that point where I understood endowments and budgets and things beyond that, like, oh, wait a minute, that's something that, and faculty aren't taught about that part of the college, which especially these days with all the budgetary issues that colleges are facing, not having that information is really doesn't allow you to really understand the challenges and the circumstances of the college as a whole. So then I started to really learn about just the infrastructure of a college, right? And then during that time, it was a 3-year position, I remember, as assistant dean that turned into 7, and then it was time to give someone else that opportunity because it really gave me some insight that I thought, oh, if my colleagues had this opportunity, they would have a different perspective of the college as a whole and their role as a faculty member. So I was then approached to consider, the Council of Independent Colleges has a senior leadership academy that those who are on, I guess you can call it middle management, can consider upper management or executive leadership. So I took that leadership academy for that year and created this conversation with this network of other individuals who are in similar roles about what does a chief academic officer look like? What does it mean? What does it entail? And at the same time of doing that, I started to apply for provost roles and got that position at Heidelberg University about 10 years ago. I took that position and made the difficult choice of leaving what was so comfortable and so part of who I was, that small liberal arts college in Virginia. All my friends, as I always call it, like my village of people, and went to Ohio where I'd never been, let alone lived, right? So I moved to Ohio, had 5 years. It was so interesting, a learning experience to learn what a provost role is all about and how I can really...
What institution was it?
Heidelberg University.
That was Heidelberg.
Okay,
that was Heidelberg.
Yeah.
Okay.
then, and I loved the role. It was very interesting, but I was really always interested in moving back to where my family was on the East Coast outside of Boston.
Yeah.
So a few years in, I just started to think, all right, is this role there? And that's what brought me to Endicott.
So you start out in research. You end up teaching, doing some research,
right.
Teaching a lot for a lot of years.
Right.
Then you dip your toes into administration.
Right.
And then you see the opportunity and the pathway forward there.
Right.
Yeah.
I knew that opportunity was not at Randolph. There was one dean who's doing that now, the provost. So I knew I had to go elsewhere.
Yep.
If it was there, I would have considered it. At the same time, I felt like it was also a good opportunity and a good challenge personally and professionally to go elsewhere in my career. And that's what led me to consider elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. What is, I know it's a big question, but if somebody was thinking about this kind of moving into administration, but like, what's your advice for people who are considering this? Because they have that similar desire.
Right. I think talking to people who are in the roles now and really understanding what's the difference between a faculty role and an administrative role, because there are different challenges. For example, I no longer got to teach.
Yeah.
Right. Some people do teach as an administrator, but when you're first in that role, it can be a 24/7 type of position where you really have to focus on it. So you lose some touch points with students. You don't have that. What I loved about teaching was the mentoring with students, and when they graduated and coming back and telling me about their successes. And I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have that at all anymore. So I think talking to people who are in the role, doing those types of leadership academies to really understand, because they give you insights. Part of it was filling in experience gaps. Like, what are some of the experiences you need to be successful as a chief academic officer that you might not have had yet as a faculty member? So, and talking to folks, in development and finance and student affairs to really understand all of the different parts of a campus.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. At my institution, we are hiring right now this year, we call the position the vice president of instruction, similar. And one of the main things that our faculty desire for that person in that position is to have faculty experience.
Yes. And when I did a number of interviews on different campuses for this role. And I've always said, who do you want to be sitting in this position? You want someone who's been in the classroom, who's had your experience, because you can't, I don't believe you can be an effective chief academic officer unless you have been a faculty member before. I mean, because in that role, you have to be able to take the perspective of both the faculty member and the college when decisions and conversations are taking place at an executive leadership team meeting. And you are the voice a lot of times for the faculty, because I did find that the other people sitting around that table, few, if any, were if I think about the two leadership teams that I was part of, no one was a full-time faculty member other than myself.
Yeah.
So I had to bring that perspective. And I also had to go back to the faculty, at faculty meetings to bring the college perspective, and had to have both conversations at both sides. That's the most challenging.
I see people in those positions get stuck and pinched in between those two.
Yes.
And it seems like that is something I have no desire for.
And that's the interesting challenge of it. I just felt like I was in some ways paying it back. Like in higher education, you need people who were dedicated faculty members to step into those roles, because you want former faculty in those chief academic officer roles. So if we don't take on that challenge, who's going to be doing it, right? Because we've seen in these last decade or so, these last few years, who's taking on administrative roles at college campuses. And it's not coming from the academy sometimes. And can be a challenge for faculty to see those leadership roles taking a more, because of the budgetary concerns, especially the business perspective. And I think that it's important to understand the financial constraints. But if the mission of a college or a university is education, it's incredibly important to have someone at that table with that kind of focus.
Yeah. So you moved to, and you transitioned to Endicott, right?
During COVID.
During COVID.
Right in the midst of COVID, I moved.
Yeah, I was bummed that I didn't get to go actually visit the campus.
Right, and we were on campus.
Yeah.
I worked with the faculty and my colleagues. We were all the students moved on campus, and had to work with a hybrid type of perspective. Sometimes the classes met because all of the classrooms had those 6 feet away desks. But the faculty there are wonderful, and they worked with us and understood why we wanted to be back on campus. There were some who had some challenges in ways that we had worked with that weren't coming back, but I think that's what made the students' experience at that college that first year a very positive one. They saw lots of their friends having to stay at home and at their parents' house in their basements, wherever, taking their classes, whereas these students were able to come back to campus. So that was a very rewarding part of that role, just to see how happy the students were to be on campus and to work with faculty who were very understanding of why we wanted to be on campus.
Yeah. So you were in that role for a couple of years before the APA opportunity came up, right?
Right. And then I was at a point in my career too where, like, okay, there's some times in your career path where you reflect back. And I remember sitting at my desk and thinking, I'm not in the classroom anymore. I really don't have interactions with students. I did create a provost student council just so that I could have once a month conversations with students. I would visit classrooms. I asked the faculty, please invite me and let me see what the classroom's like on this campus. I remember I taught some class meetings for different faculty whose topics were related to my expertise. But I wasn't with students. There were 8 deans of different schools, and the faculty reported to the dean, so I wasn't really even interacting with faculty as much. And I thought, what brought me to higher ed? And what am I doing now? As much as I enjoyed it, and it was a challenging role, there are always circumstances that make you think about the role that you're in. And during that transition, I had one of my mentors say, why don't you take a look at places where you have had memberships? So that summer, when she said it, that same day, I looked at apa.org, and there was this job that said Associate Director of the Office of Applied Psychology. And I thought, well, that could be a good transition. And that's what led me to apply to that job that summer. And then I started in October.
When you saw that job description, were you like reading through it and saying, I check all these boxes, or I don't know if I check all these boxes?
I felt like I checked the boxes because I was taking a step back career-wise, right? I wasn't going to be a chief of something. I wasn't going to be on the executive leadership team. I was really taking a step back in considering how can I get back into psychology. And so that was the job that was there. I gave myself, I remember I had a few months. I live up the street from the beach. I had a beach chair. I would go up to the beach and just watch the water and think, what's next? It was a difficult I was changing my career path from 31 years in higher ed to something completely different. But it has been the best change for me, just as I consider, think about the last quarter of my career or the last 10 years of my career. It's a remote role, so I get to stay where I wanted to live.
And where do you live?
I live in a small town called Manchester by the Sea, which is on the north shore of Massachusetts. I always say it's near Gloucester, Rockport, Salem. And if you watch the incredibly depressing movie Manchester by the Sea, that's where it was filmed.
Yep.
Great movie, but wow.
Yeah.
It's a tough one that we watched when we moved there. Like, we should watch this. And oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great movie. Again, great movie. But we wanted to stay there. My family, my brother, sister-in-law, my mom's kind of close by. I'd never had the chance to live back in Massachusetts, let alone on the coast. So that's where I live. APA as all remote now.
Yeah.
After the pandemic, I never went to the office in DC. It's the building still there. We occasionally have meetings that are there, but I had to have that transition to working remotely from having worked on a college campus surrounded by people for that long. Yep. And it was I actually gain energy from working around people.
Me too.
So what I did, from the advice of my children who know me well, they're like, you need to join something. So I joined the gym up the street, and I go there every morning, and I get that in-person interaction and made great friends from doing that.
It's interesting. I need to start my day that way too, with people.
You do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful because, one, I'm healthier for it, right?
Yeah.
And I made a whole great new group of friends, and I get that energy from those people, come home, and I get to just work from my house and in a very comfortable place. Yeah. And work with wonderful people on a topic that I have great passion for.
Yeah, so good.
And what's also good is that, unlike a CAO position, at the end of the day, I can shut my computer and not be incredibly stressed about what's coming the next day. What fire do I have to put out the next day? What issue is there, that important issues that faculty might bring up, parents might bring up, students might bring up, staff might bring up. It's a totally different pace.
Oh, that's good.
So it's a very, I like to describe it as a job that doesn't feel like work. Right? Because it's something I really enjoy doing. My day is, I think we started, what's your day like? Well, I have meetings with different people, both inside the organization and outside the organization, to talk about achieving the goals of our initiatives and maybe changing the goals of our initiatives and what's the direction that we should go in and who can I collaborate with, all these wonderful, smart other people with degrees in psychology or outside of psychology that work at APA. So it's just, I feel very fortunate to have made that shift, as difficult of a shift as it was.
Yeah. Well, your story is kind of unique, I think, in that, like, we definitely know people who have gone from faculty into dipping their toes into administration or something like that. Right. But the career change that you've gone through and changing, like moving, moving, especially mid-career moves, right. That's a really interesting path. That there's somebody listening out here who's considering probably a move like that. Right.
And the other thing I would say, you asked a good question about advice. I was able to connect with other provosts, with other deans. On your campus, you're kind of isolated because you're the only person in that role with those particular challenges of that role. So fortunately, like at Heidelberg, we met with the president, provost, dean of students, and so on from others in our athletic conference. So I got to know all the provosts at all those schools, and we met once a semester and would come together on a college campus and talk.
Yeah.
I reached out to those folks a lot. And then the network through the CIC, they have a CAO conference every year.
Yeah.
And that conference brings together provosts from across the country and beyond, and you have to really recreate the network. And that's where I was saying, when I got back to ACT, I was like, oh, I love that CAO community. It was great, but I'm back with my people, right? It was so like the people when I started grading AP Psych tests, those people were all there. So the high school teachers, the college teachers, and it was just the people who I felt like I'd started my journey with, that I was back and be able
Well,
to.
and some of them are still here. So you're
Yes.
seeing them at sessions, right?
Yes.
A handful of them.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I've had to have this conversation we're having, like, you're at APA? Wait, I didn't know. I
Right.
thought you were a provost.
Well,
Like, well,
yeah.
no, let me tell you how this journey, where this journey.
Well, now they
has
can
been.
listen to your story.
Right,
So.
right. Yeah. And I'm happy always if anyone is interested in making this transition, I'm happy for people to reach out to me, because I have friends and colleagues who are in the role or thinking about the role that I have a lot of conversations with, where I just say, here's things to consider, or they're having challenges. And we just talk, like, here's some things to consider. And I love that kind of mentoring.
Yeah.
I feel like just something that I feel like I can have that impact, and it brings me great joy just to help colleagues and friends who are facing those kind of challenges.
Well, you heard the invitation, folks. You can email her and she will get back to you from her comfy office, her comfy home office after she goes to the gym.
That's like, when I get back home.
Yeah. Beth, thank you so much for this conversation. I look forward to what's coming out of APA next. And I'm actually looking forward to you kind of, it's not your stamp, but your unique, your individuality, and in this position is going to be is going to be fun to watch.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be able to be part of it.
And good luck with the AI problem challenge opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.